الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين، نبينا وقدوتنا محمد عليه أفضل الصلاة وأزكى تسليم. اللهم علمنا بما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما يا رب العالمين. To beginning classical Arabic, Wednesday evening. Hope you all are well, inshallah. Here we go. Okay, so last time we had finished the previous lesson. The last exercise that we had was a perfect segue and jumping point off to what we're going to see more of. Remember that Arabic favors the jumla fi'liya. It favors the verbal sentence actually over the nounal sentence. But up until now, we've mostly been dealing with nounal sentences, right? What's the difference between the two? Why would you use one as opposed to the other? We notice in the Quran very, very often that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses jumla ismiya to talk about things that are kind of essential natures, right? Things that don't necessarily change. Whereas things that are with jumla fi'liya are generally things that require renewal. Things that might be true at a particular time, but are understood to perhaps not be true at other times. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu is the refrain, not Ya ayyuhal mu'mineen. And there's a significance behind that, right? Allah is referring to faith as something that requires renewal, constant commitment, and it's not something that is simply, okay, once you do it, then you're good, right? And so the default meaning of the jumla ismiya is something that is essential, something that is unchanging. Whereas the default meaning of something that is jumla fi'liya is something that is changing or needs renewal or might not always be in that case. So we started getting our feet wet with the jumla fi'liya, which is the predominant form, last time. And we talked about the three essential parts of the jumla fi'liya. Could somebody either unmute themselves or put in the chat box, what are the essential parts or in general, the parts of a jumla fi'liya? And I'll let you type that while I go ahead, Sister Musarrat. Well, I plug in my computer. One second.
So it'll be fail, which is the verb, file, and maf'ul.
Yes, that's correct. The fi'l, which is the verb, the fa'il, which is the one who is doing the verb, and the maf'ul, which is the object of the verb. And there's
and the file can be built in or it can be also separate.
Correct. Exactly. So it'll either be implied or explicit, either an implicit or an explicit fa'il. and we'll see plenty of that as we go forth. And we saw a little bit of that last class. So now, exciting, we're on to a new lesson. الدرس الثانية عشرة. Let's have, let's see, how long is this? About 2 pages. Okay, we'll go through it. We'll give everybody the opportunity, inshallah ta'ala, to read the dialogue. And so, our first pair, star 1 and star 2. Let's have the Sayyids. One of you be star 1 and the other be star 2.
Assalamualaikum. It's only me today.
Oh, it's only you today? Okay, no problem. Then why don't you pair up with Sister Musarrat? So, Sister Syra, you be star number 1, and Sister Musarrat will be number 2.
Sure. Okay. Kaifa haluki ya bintu?
sorry. أنا بخير والحمد لله.
من من أين أنت؟
أنا من سوريا.
ما اسمك؟
اسمي آمنة.
أين أبوك؟
أبي هنا في المدينة المنورة. هو مفتش في المدرسة الثانوية.
Very good. Stop there. Very good. Excellent work. Okay, so let's we'll just correct a couple things, and then we'll go through and translate, and then we will point out some things as well. Okay, so one of the things, just make sure we're looking for the jumla, excuse me, not the jumla, the hamzat al-wasl, right? Remember the rule. We do not pronounce it if it's in the middle or at the end. We only pronounce it if it's at the middle. So this would be pronounced ismi amina too. Yep. And then this would be mesmuki, right? We're gonna basically act like this doesn't even exist. Mesmuki. Very good. Okay. That was one thing I heard. And oh yeah, abuki. Remember that abu or eb is the default word, right? Eb meaning father. And it is one of the quote unquote 5 nouns. Al-asma ul-khamsa. And what are the 5 nouns? وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا أَسْمَاءُ الْخَمْسَةِ. They are nouns that are declined, meaning they manifest grammatical case with a letter instead of a haraka, with a long letter. Okay? So instead of abuka, it's abuka. And instead of abuki, it's abuki. And that is done for some good reasons, you can probably tell, because it sounds a little bit hard to hear and hard to stay with if it were just short vowels. Pardon me, I'll rearrange some things. There we go. Okay. So instead of abuka or abuki in this case, and we're going to talk about in a minute, it is abuki. So don't be thrown off just because now you have a long wow. This is the same eb that you know and love, my dear father. But since it is possessed, then it's going to demonstrate its grammatical position with a waw, an alif, or a ya, and not with a dhamma, a kasra, or a fatha. Okay. The other thing to notice is that we have a conversation between 2 females. Okay. Everything in this conversation is using ki, which is the possessive pronoun for feminine, right? So kayfa haluki, min aina anti, right? The subject pronoun for second person feminine. Masmuki, aina abuki. Okay, so that's the main point here, is that now we're going to add another concern of ours, which is gender. Previously, all of the nouns that we've been dealing with have been, or excuse me, all of the verbs that we have been dealing with have been masculine. Dhahaba, kharaja, etc., etc. We're going to be looking at feminine forms of both nouns and verbs in this lesson. So if we go to the first line, let's translate that. Dr. Syra, what's this translate to?
How are you, a girl?
Yeah, hey girl. That's exactly it. That's what it is, right? Like we would say, you know, in English we would flip it. We would say, "Hey, yeah, Bint, hey girl, how you doing?" Right? So that's exactly what it is. Hal means state or condition of something, right? Hal is state or condition. So that's the noun, and we're adding to it the possessive pronoun, in this case, second person singular feminine. Ki, kayfa haluki. What literally, how is your state, or how is your status, how is your, you know, whatever. And the response, ana bi khairin walhamdulillah. And that probably doesn't even need translation. We've been seeing that a lot. Notice how ana bi khair is jumla ismiya. Walhamdulillah is jumla ismiya. Okay, we're still in jumla ismiya here because we're talking about how are we doing, right? Min aina anti, what's that translate to, Dr. Sire?
Where are you from?
Yes, exactly. If it were aina anti, it would be where are you? Min aina anti, literally from where are you? Or as we would say with English syntax, where are you from? And the response again probably doesn't need to be translated. Ana min Suria. I am from Syria. Yes, question.
This wow before Alhamdulillah, is that optional or is that compulsory?
Ana bi khair. Alhamdulillah. If you did not have the waw, you would simply have a period, right?
Okay.
Because there are two separate sentences. Ana bi khair. Mubtada khabar. Alhamdulillah. Mubtada khabar. Right? However, if you have ever read anything in Arabic before, you know that in Arabic they are not shy of the run-on sentence. They love them some run-on sentences. And so the predominant usage is just wow, 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 instead of period, new sentence, period, new sentence, period, new sentence. It's not strange, nor is it considered aib. It's not considered a what would we say in English? It's not considered unacademic, or it's not considered any a deficiency at all to have an entire paragraph be one sentence and just clause after clause after clause connected with wa 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 wa. It makes translation actually very difficult. One of the things that you'll notice once you start translating, and inshallah with our enrichment class, those of you who are interested, we will soon start that up, inshallah, working out some things with the people over in Medina. But as you will soon notice, your first job as a translator is to decide where to break up the sentences, because you're going to get either a huge, you know, run-on sentence as an audio clip, or you're going to get a run-on sentence, what we would consider a run-on sentence in text. Notice that Surya is mabni, right? Normally it would have to be majroor, right? But it is mabni on the alif, and so it doesn't demonstrate grammar, even though it is fi mahal il jar. It is in the genitive case, even though it doesn't show it. Masmuki, ismi amina, all of that is beyond translation, I think. Aina abuki, where is your father? Let's have Sister Musarrat translate the response to that, because that's where it starts to get interesting.
You want me to answer the question?
Translate the response. Abi huna.
Oh, there is, yeah. My father is, I think huna means there.
Huna means here. Hunak
Oh, here.
means
Oh.
there. So that's a good
Okay.
thing to point out. Thank you for that.
So my father is here in Medina, in in Medina Munawwara. I don't know, illuminated Medina.
Yes.
He is, let's see, he's something in the secondary school.
Good, good, good. So that's going to be a perfect segue for me to give you a brief introduction to morphology. But first, huna, hunak. Okay. So huna would translate as here, and colloquially in street talk in both in most of the Arabian Peninsula, they say hina instead of huna. The classical Arabic is huna. So on the street, you'll hear hina. And hunak is there. Okay, this is something that recurs throughout Arabic. This kaf is not the sort of kaf that indicates you or yours. It's not a pronoun. However, it does indicate something that's far, right? Like hada and dhalika, right? You'll find that kaf often pops up when we move from something that's nearby or something that's far away. Haula'i and ulaika, which we have not learned yet. These and those are far. These are near. Hada, dhalika, huna, hunak. It's a sort of kind of a phonetic principle that kaf, if it's not a pronoun, it's something else, often is evidence of something that's far away. And that holds true in this case, hunak. So the response is Abi, my father, huna fil madinatil munawwarati, in Medina, right? Al-Madinatil munawwarati, the enlightened city or the illuminated city. Huwa mufattishun fil madrasati thanawiyati. Okay, good. So we'll do the easy part, then we'll do the hard part. The easy part is fil madrasati. We know that's a school. As thanawiyati is a secondary school. This is a literal translation from Arabic to English. It works. We say secondary school to mean high school in English. This literally, and we have not learned this yet, so don't panic. We'll learn the cardinal and ordinal numbers later. But this is an ordinal number, which is a thanawiya, secondary, from ithnain, which is two. A thani is the second. A thanawiyati here is secondary. Don't worry about it. We'll get to it later. Fil madrasati thanawiyati. He is such and such a thing in secondary. Now let's. Do you have any questions about that before mufattish? We're gonna go into the ocean with mufattish. So any questions about anything else before we talk about mufattish? Okay, let's take a little bit of a dive here. So one of the most enjoyable and vexing things about Arabic language is its morphology. Okay, what is morphology? What does it cover? Okay, morphology in language or in linguistics is a field of study that's different from syntax, right? Syntax is the order of words, right? Or grammar, which is, well, we could say that the syntax is part of grammar, but let's say like grammatical case, which talks about the relationships between words. How do you know what's doing what in the sentence, right? And it's different from phonetics, which we've talked about a little bit too. Phonetics has to do with the sounds, right? So the study of morphology as a field of study is how words change on predictable patterns to convey meaning. Okay. How words change on predictable patterns to convey meaning. For example, I'll give you an example in English. Okay. If we have the verb to bake, okay, that is a verb. We have a different type of word, a past participle. It is baked. Huh. And then if we have the person who does that baking, they're called a baker, right? Do you see how the same root word is undergoing systematic change on fixed patterns to convey different meanings? Okay, so let's just imagine, for example, that this is kind of like, this is what we know, it's a verb. Let's say that this is kind of like your base form. And by base form, I mean that it's not going to be reduced to any smaller parts. Okay. whereas baked equals that's called the past participle. Not necessary for you to know it, but what's the sign of it is that we're adding a D in this case, or an ED in other cases. Okay, what about the doer, as we say in English? It is a different formula. We're adding an R, or in other cases, an ER, right? So now what we've figured out is that these different suffixes or prefixes have meanings, and words can change with these suffixes and prefixes in order to establish different types of meanings. We know now that you know plus D means that that action has been done to something, right? We know that plus R or plus ER means that, oh, that's the person who does that thing, or is known for doing that thing, or does that thing repeatedly, right? So this is all morphology. Now in English, it's fairly straightforward and familiar to us because these changes tend to happen on the ends of the words, right? They can occasionally happen in the beginnings of the words, but they mostly happen on the ends of the words. Let's imagine, remember way back our first lesson, we had our language called Engelbic, right? Remember Engelbic? We had a Tamu, hit, the balla, right? We're going to go back to our Engelbic for just a second. Let's imagine for a second that in Engelbic, we're not just restricted to adding suffixes on the ends of words. We can actually change something in the middle of the word itself to convey that meaning. Okay, so let's imagine that, okay, we have bake and we have baked. But let's imagine for a second that adding an R, yes, does make the doer, but it doesn't, it's not changed on, or it's not added on to the end. Rather, it's added on in the middle of the word. Barca. Right? Now, as English speakers, that doesn't make sense. We know that's not English, but in Engelbic, that's acceptable. Okay? And if you recognize that this is what's going on, you can take any verb and do the same patterns with it. Let's take, hit. Okay? Now it's hurt is the one who does the hitting, right? What we would say the hitter in English. In Engelbic, it's hurt, right? And so on and so forth. So in English, we only add these things to the end. In Arabic, it's not so restricted. It's not restricted to the end. There are regular changes and regular patterns that can be done either at the end of the word, or the beginning of the word, or the middle of the word, that communicate or convey a different meaning. Okay, that's your intro to morphology. All right, now if we're clear with that and we're on board for that, let's see where we can go with this. Let's take we're only going to be talking about right now in this instance, we're only going to talk, well, no, that's not true. We're not going to be talking about, we're going to be talking about verbs first, okay? Because in Arabic, everything is based off of the verb. So if we take a verb, let's say jalasa. We had that in our last lesson. Jalasa means to sit. Jalasa literally means he sat, past tense. Okay? This is a verb. Now, we can manipulate this verb and change it according to regular patterns in order to achieve different meanings with this same verb, or we can give it different shades or different colors. Maybe not something as dramatic as an entirely different meaning. So if jalasa means he sat, very, very straightforward. What happens if we double the middle letter? We have, with a shadda, jallasa. Jallasa. In Arabic, this is a morphological pattern. Doubling the middle letter of any past tense verb does work, and that work is predictable. What it does is it makes a verb transitive, or it makes a transitive verb doubly so. What does that mean? It means that if the verb had an object before, now it has two objects. If it didn't have an object before, now it has an object. In practice, what that means is instead of he sat, he made something sit. So whereas before, he sat is what's called an intransitive verb. It doesn't have an object. He sat. Now, jallasa, we double the middle letter. It means he made something else sit down. Okay? Now, this exists for every single, well, not every single, but the vast majority of verbs. You can take this and you can put it on this form, and it will mean something very, very similar. It can also result in something that has to do with, let's say, violence, or what am I going to say? Like something that is kind of extreme. I'll show you by an example. Let's say kasara, from which we get the word kasra. Kasara means to break, or literally, he broke. Okay. Let's put it on this pattern here. Let's double the middle letter. Kassara. Oof, I'm not ready. Kassara indicates he shattered, right? He did the thing either repeatedly or violently. It has this other sort of quality to it that's not there in kasara, right? If you say kasara, somebody, it might have fallen out of their hands. It might have been an accident. You say kassara, that means that this person took the thing and shattered it on purpose, right? So this is just a demonstration of what we're talking about. This is morphology. These are morphological patterns. Okay, in Arabic, these morphological patterns are represented, or I should say in the English language, we represent these patterns of the verb with Roman numerals. Yes, we do. We say like, so this is form 1 or form I, right, which means 1 in Roman numerals of the verb. He sat, fa'ala, jalasa, rataba, kataba, it's all on the same sort of pattern. You can get the rhythm of it. Okay. This jallasa is known as form 2, I. How many forms are there in Arabic? There are 10 that are used commonly. 10 that are used commonly. And they achieve very, very important meanings. We find them everywhere. They can't even resist giving one to you so early in your studies. But actually understanding Arabic morphology is extremely useful from an early stage of Arabic language learning, because it multiplies the amount of words that you learn with each root word. So if I know jalasa and I understand the forms, let's say I understand all 10 forms of the verb, then that means that I've learned 10 words at once. If I learn the patterns, the other morphological patterns within these forms, how do I make the doer? How do I make the object? How do I make this and that and the other? Now we might be learning 20, 30 words every time we learn just one word, right? So let's get down to our example here, mufattish, okay? I'll give you an example. Let's just stick to form 1 and form 2. That will keep it nice and easy. If I want to make the doer of the verb in form 1, I need a certain pattern. And that pattern is fa'il. So if I want to make the fa'il, the doer of the verb, in form 1, I have to subordinate or put, conform this verb to that pattern. Fa'il. So now I make someone who's a sitter, who can figure it out, who can tell me. Take this verb jalasa, put it on this form fa'ilun, and tell me how to say a sitter.
Jalis.
Jalisun. Yes. We had this very early on, I think. Jalisun. Very good. Follows the pattern exactly. Okay. That's how we make the doer in form 1. But we don't make the doer the same way in form 2. We have to make it a different way. So the way that we make it in form 2 is we add mu before it, not like the cow, just a meme with a dhamma over it. And we change the middle letter to have a kasra, the middle letter which is doubled. So let's put it on the using fa'ala. It would be mufa'il. That's how you do the doer in the second form. So what does that do to our verb jallasa, to make someone sit down? Becomes mujallis. So mujallis is somebody who forces other people to sit down. Something that could be said in jest, probably. You're teasing somebody. Mujallis. Mujallisun. Mufattishun is exactly this form of word. So we can trace back this word to its root in the first form. And we can recognize that this is, it's on the second form. It's the second form, the doer of that verb. So fatasha is the form 1, which means something to be revealed. Fattasha, double that middle letter, it means to reveal something. Someone who forces something else to be revealed. And a mufattish is someone who does that work, which is an inspector, right? Someone who forces something to be revealed. Mufattish is an inspector. Oops. That is your first swim in the deep end with Arabic morphology, which is known as sarf. This whole thing, morphology, in Arabic is known as sarf.
So what about Fatouche?
Fatouche, that's something slightly different. Okay. Okay, let me explain after I write this down. Okay. So mufattishun is an inspector.
I just meant it had the same letters, so I just wondered how does that go to a salad?
That's very good. Now, where people get things from, I don't know, especially with food. Sometimes you find things like in Italian cuisine, you find things that are named all sorts of crazy different things. Like there's something called like, a cardinal's hat in Italian because it resembles like this piece of clothing that this certain clergyman wears, right? And so you'll find all sorts of interesting connections, and a lot of times it has to do with history. But there are other forms. That's what's called Sila Mubaraka. Okay, Sila Mubaraka has to do with, let's say, okay, this is good. Well, it ties back to our jalisun. Okay, let's go form 1. Jalasa, he sat. Jalisun, he's a sitter, or he is sitting. What if we want to, like, maybe we're teasing somebody that we love, and we want to say that this person is always sitting down, right? He is just constantly sitting and sitting and sitting. We hardly ever see him get up. Okay, there's different forms in the Arabic language called Sila Mubaraka that are that convey these sorts of meanings, right? So one of them would be jalus. And you don't need to know this, but this is just for whoever wants to know. Like jalus or jallas, right? And where we find these patterns the most is with Allah's names, right? We find these patterns all over with Allah's 99 names.
Jabbar,
Yes, exactly.
Qahhar.
Jabbar is on the wazn or on the pattern of fa'al. So we have Jabbar, Qahhar, Ghaffar, right? All these different. Yes. So this is called Sila Mubaraka. I'll write that for you too. It means this is kind of like the pinnacle of something. Sigha. Sigha means a form. It's like the something to communicate when something has reached its pinnacle. Sigha Mubalagha. Running out of space here. Sigha Mubalaghati. Mubalagha means like extreme or over the top, not in a bad way, but just intensity. So there are several patterns. I think there's 5 of them, if off the top of my head. Some of them are more used than others. So some of them Kareem, right? Fa'il, and then others Fa'ul, Ghafur, right? Shakur. Allah is Shakur. Jallas on the pattern of Fa'al. So there are these sort of devices which we see all over the place.
Okay, so balagha means convey. So
It means to
balagha means to reach or to convey, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So mubalagha means like, I guess, most eloquent or something.
Yes, or reaches the heights or reaches the.
Oh, right. Reaches the heights. Okay.
Very good. Excellent. Good connection. Okay, so we took a dive. Okay, if this is all Greek to you, don't worry about it. We're going to work on it slowly. I tried to make this a very, very minor introduction. We only focused on the two, form 1 and form 2. Just the verb form, jalasa, and the ism fa'il, or the doer, jalisun, mujallisun, because that's directly what's giving us mufattishun here, which is an inspector. A mufattish is an inspector, somebody who causes things to be revealed. Any questions about that at all?
It's very interesting.
You see what you've gotten yourself into now, right? You thought you were just going to learn, ana bi khairin, right? Now it's like, whoa, wait a second. Yeah, it's a different way. I mean, languages are beautiful and languages are interesting. And all language is about conveying meaning and communicating meaning. And if you look at it like that, then you learn, okay, languages convey meaning with all different types of ways, right? English, Germanic languages, Romance languages, they are analytic languages. They much more rely on word order, but they do have morphology as well. But if we can name it, say, hey, this whole thing that we do, even without thinking, baker, hitter, sitter, quitter, right? It's morphology. And what we consider morphology in English, it might happen differently in another language or slightly differently, right? This is exactly what's going on here in Arabic. Same principles, it's morphology, it's using predictable patterns to convey different types of meaning. But where those patterns can pop up is more flexible than in English. They can be in the middle, they can be in the beginning, they can be on the end.
And this file is singular male, right?
Correct. Yep, exactly, which is good, because that exactly what she's anticipating, that this is just the base form. That means that, okay, it's like spinning plates. Okay, you spin one plate, then you add a second, then you add a third, then you add a fourth. Okay, so this is the base form. But jalasa is a verb that can be conjugated for feminine singular, for second person, for first person, right? And so that you have to carry that with you throughout all these sorts of things. If you want to, you can also conjugate verbs in the second form, jalastu, jalasa, jalasna, etc. And if the doer is feminine, yes, instead of mufattishun, it would be mufattishatun, right? We add a tamurbuta, or jalisatun,
Tishat.
Yeah, and then we pluralize it, and then so we have to. So
Tishun. No,
exactly,
Tish.
exactly.
No, what would I don't know.
We'll get
Like
there. We'll get there.
okay.
We will get there, but that's the long-term goal. Okay, so the short-term goal is to introduce that this thing is a thing. Morphology is a thing. It's part of the study of language. All languages do it, and Arabic is different from English and Romance languages in some ways, but it's easier than others, like tonal languages, right, that communicate meaning with tones, right? So it's just about getting familiar with what are the tools that Arabic uses at its disposal to communicate meaning.
It seems easier than English actually.
Honestly, it is. You'll find it might be overwhelming at first, but you'll find that once you understand the forms,
Yeah, it's very logical.
yes, the forms of the verb and all of the different types of words that you can make from them, you'll be like, wow, Arabic is so organized. All I have to do is learn the 3-letter root word, and I have 40 words. I can just make them. I just have to figure out kind of how to, plug in the inputs and get the equation. Whereas English is much more irregular, right? Because it's a hybrid of Germanic and Romance languages. And so it has some rules and vocab from Germanic languages and some rules and vocab from Romance languages. And so, it's very, very irregular how those things are applied, right? So at the end of it, you'll say, wow, this is extremely, extremely organized and actually makes the language very predictable once you have kind of ground your face against learning these these morphological rules. Okay, we've run over time. Anybody have any other questions?
Will you be doing this all again at any point?
Doing what again?
Um, this whole thing, like the
Oh yeah,
conjugate.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
With morphology, yes. This is just first time. You're gonna have to hear this multiple times in order for it to
Okay.
stick.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's 10 forms. I only just introduced the second one. There's also
Yeah.
many other different types of words you can make. We just looked at the doer. There's the object. There's ways to make words that indicate that it's a tool. There's ways to make words that indicate the place where something is done, right? Or the time where something is done, all these sorts of things. That's going to come later, and we're going to go back over and over and over this concept. But I find it beneficial to introduce to you now so that it's on your radar and you kind of start to get it in your head.
I think we've already done quite a few, but we just haven't. Like for example, mudarris. Like we've done a few of these words, but we just haven't connected them to
No,
the
you're right.
root.
You are right about that. Sister Aram, did you have something?
Yeah, see, because we have the same words, but we have different meanings of the same word. For example, jalus. In our language, jalus means a procession.
Mm.
And so that's why sometimes we get confused. Maybe its meaning is, because in Arabic, the meaning is different. Jalus. Like we have word taftish. Taftish means interrogation.
Yeah, taftish is interrogation. It is the same in Arabic, and it comes from this root. So mufattish is an inspection to make the mastar, which is like the gerund. Is anyway. We'll go into that later.
And when we pray, it's called julus, right? When we sit, when we pray. I mean, um,
Correct.
yeah, right.
Julus is what it's named the position in prayer. So not
Yeah.
everything. So there's some patterns that do double duty. Okay, some patterns are Sila Mubaraka, but they're also a normal masdar, which is a gerund, right? So sitting, right? Sitting is julus, normal sitting. But in context, it can also be, if you intend by it Sila Mubaraka, that means someone who sits a lot. So it will depend on context. So we'll see that some patterns do double duty, though that's not the norm. The norm is that everything kind of has its own pattern. Good stuff. Any other questions?
No, this is so interesting.
Alhamdulillah. It's recorded, so if you need to go back and refresh yourself, please avail yourself of YouTube. And we will meet again Saturday, inshallah. Stay tuned for updates on the enrichment aspect of things too, inshallah ta'ala. And we ask Allah to accept our worship and increase our beneficial knowledge and make it a hujjah for us, not against us. Ameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.